A blue guy is cautiously entering a lab of some sort. Calling out receives no response, so they decide to have a poke around. None of the curiosities they find offer a response, not one that they can understand anyway, until a softly spoken and thus probably evil chap appears. It seems softly spoken here was responsible for saving the planet of the blue guy species. Actually, that's not quite true. He gestures towards the creature in the containment unit as having solved the problem, so perhaps the episode's title is a pun. Either way, a planet has been saved and a debt is due for payment. Blue Guy tries to explain that they'll be unable to pay the agreed charge, some ore in this case, due to the catastrophe from which they were saved, but Softly Spoken knows this to be a lie. Threats about removing the solution convince Blue Guy that maybe they don't need the ore to repair their replicators after all, and perhaps they can find another way of stopping their people from all starving to death. Their business concluded, Blue Lad is shown to his shuttle and departs. Janeway's in her ready room playing with a logic puzzle that Paris introduced to the crew, and one that has the distinct whiff of foreshadowing to it, not least of which because that looks like quite an expensive prop for something that doesn't matter. Let's ignore it for now, just like the writers want us to, and go to the bridge to look at a dilithium-rich asteroid that Seven has found. Close-range scans show it has easily accessible deposits if we poop some yellow at it. The rock has other ideas, and after we see it coming and raise shields, it kabooms. The result is a cloud of gas that means we can't use engines, and another ship arrives which Seven recognizes. They're from a species who act as bounty hunters that capture ships for rewards, and Chakotay suggests they may have been hired by the Malon or the Devore. As an aside, both of those species are now over 20,000 light-years away by this point, as we used Borg super fast mode at the end of Dark Frontier. Either the Malon or Devore have got very big territories indeed, or this bounty hunter group takes their business seriously enough to warrant the 15-year journey back there to cash Voyager in. It seems a bit odd to me that Chakotay doesn't see this, but then he did get punched in the head a lot in the last episode, so maybe it's that. But again, I digress. As they stick a tractor beam on us, the bounty hunters give us a call to let us know we shouldn't bother shooting, as it'll ignite the cloud. Janeway instead sees this as a personal challenge, and after sticking everything we've got in the shields, poops some yellow at the gas to light it. The blast throws us clear, and we scarper at warp. Janeway thinks it's odd that they're not following, and a quick trip to Astrometrics explains why. Chakotay, Tuvok and Kim are down there looking at long-range scans, and the results show a shitload of those bounty hunters all around us. They aren't chasing us because they don't need to. Tuvok also relays some data from Seven, telling us these people take their jobs very seriously indeed. I suppose that could explain why they're still hunting us if they were hired by people we left way behind, but it feels tenuous to me, not least of which because we've never seen these bounty hunters before yet are now surrounded by double figures. Regardless, Chakotay takes what we know to Janeway as she wants to look at the data herself. Which is why we find her sometime later in the mess hall, chain-chugging coffee while she tries to find a solution. Most of their escape routes are blocked, and she's convinced the others must be traps as a result. As she takes a break, she hears a voice behind her. It's softly spoken, and after waxing lyrical about the appeal of difficult puzzles, explains that he's here to solve ours. Well, not really here. He's a projection, but it's the same thing. He explains he's part of a group that hunts for difficult problems, the solutions to which they'll provide, for a price. The fee itself changes depending on the client, which is some needful things level bullshit right there, in case you're in any doubt that this guy is a dodgy bastard. He gives Janeway a taste of what they can do, a sample of probable ambushes by these bounty hunter gits. Janeway's interested and wants to meet in person. Softly Spoken agrees, but under the conditions of having only one person accompany her and there being no scans. For someone who just broke in, he certainly values his privacy. Time for that meeting. Softly Spoken's ship wibbles into space, and we do a bit of oohing and ahhing at the materials used, as they're ahead of what both the Federation and the Borg have achieved. Janeway wants that Borg perspective with her, and Seven is chosen as her companion. We teleport over and are told by Softly Spoken that the shiny ball in the middle of the floor acts as a telepathic translator for his group, enabling them to communicate. As to the group itself, we're introduced to Pink Jellyfish, Tall Crab, Space Whale, and Spiky Skynet. Together, they've been responsible for many achievements, according to Softly Spoken, one of which is recently finding a cure to the Vidian phage. I guess it's just as well we've left them behind, so I don't have to change their name from the Plague Lads. Spiky Skynet has taken a shine to Seven's implants and wants to speak with her. She agrees and they have a telepathic chat, Spiky Skynet apparently taking an interest in learning how to integrate biological systems into itself. Janeway has no objection, which I'd argue isn't her choice anyway, and Seven provides what data she has. With that out of the way, Softly Spoken says he thinks they have a solution to our problem, and one that won't require conflict. All that remains is the cost, and we leave them with a database of our tech and materials so that Softly Spoken and his friends can decide what particular pound of flesh they intend to extract later. Softly Spoken has returned as a projection once more, with not a single request but a list. Oh look, there's the foreshadowing box again, for no reason. Anywho, the list contains mostly things we can live without, our data on quantum slipstream drives, one of Neelix's recipes for some damn reason, and a totem from Chakotay that Janeway thinks he'll agree to give up without bothering to ask him. The last item on the list is a more interesting proposition though. They want 7 of 9 to join them. Janeway's dead set against it, but Softly Spoken thinks the decision should be Seven's, and to be fair, he has a point. Her own opinion is initially one of logic. Voyager needs their help and she's payment. 1 life in exchange for however many crew the writers have decided are on Voyager this week. It's a simple calculation. Janeway assures her that Voyager will make it out with or without their help, and instead asks Seven what she wants. After all, Softly Spoken and his mates solve puzzles for a living. Bringing order to chaos is right up her alley. Hell, they might even let her have her own quarters. Seven's interested but needs more data, so has a chat with Softly Spoken herself. He's candid in why they want her. She's not only highly intelligent herself, but carries the knowledge of the Borg and a number of enhancements from them. Such ability is wasted here, and they can offer so much more of a challenge. Whilst true, Seven's concerned about their methods. They could help anyone if they wished, but instead demand payment from those with little other choice. Softly Spoken himself was taken as payment when he was only a child. Seven decides that she can achieve her goals on Voyager, and tells Softly Spoken as much. He begins to object, but doesn't get the chance to finish as Seven's called to the bridge, with Softly Spoken joining us. We're being attacked by 2 of the bounty hunter ships. Our pooping doesn't seem to be doing much, and things look dire, until Softly Spoken offers us a tip that helps us win. Perhaps he doesn't want his payment damaged. If it was an attempt to convince Seven, it fails, and she reiterates her decision to stay. Softly Spoken objects, saying Janeway should order Seven to join them. Janeway doesn't like being told to sacrifice her crew, perhaps because she's perfectly capable of making that decision all on her own, and some fiddling with our shields blocks Softly Spoken's projection. Janeway's under no illusion that this will be the end of things, and a conference among Softly Spoken and his mates, except Space Whale, who doesn't get a say in the matter for some reason, seems to confirm her suspicions. Oh no! Voyager's been destroyed! A bounty hunter ship is flying through the debris and having a bit of a rant about how they were only supposed to blow the bloody doors off or something. Not really, of course. It's a trap by Janeway, and we kaboom the kabooms that we planted on the fake debris. The ship is disabled, and we teleport the 2 bounty hunters over to take a tour of our brig. Bit odd that there's only 1 ship, given that the earlier long-range scans showed them in groups, but maybe they've changed tactics. Either way, we stick their ship in our shuttle bay so we can have a poke around. Tuvok turns up to say we've learned nothing from our prisoners. A point to the writers here for asking if he'd tried a mind meld, and a point deducted for the ethical dubiousness of it all. It didn't get them anything anyway. Not to worry, as we found something else. Communication from the client. And whoever it is visited them in person too, leaving some shed biological matter in the process. It's a bit scrambled, but the doc can do science to it and give us a hologram of who it is. Looks like the Malon after all, which doesn't make much sense if they're just toxic Ferengi. There's no money in it. Janeway thinks the same and finds some anomalies in the sample, suggesting it was really a projection. We instead recreate that to find that the true client isn't particularly surprising. It would appear that gaining 7 was the point all along. Janeway thinks the bounty hunters would be interested to learn who their real client is. The fact that Softly Spoken chose to hide his identity suggests there's more to this, and we learn his group is well known throughout this sector for being a proper bunch of dickbags. In fact, a lot of people would pay handsomely for their capture, which is why we're all in a meeting together, Voyager crew and bounty hunter alike, to discuss how we're going to nab the bastards. Hours of planning bear no fruit. They're too tough a nut to crack either with force or tactics. They're an unsolvable puzzle, just like the foreshadowing toy that Janeway's playing with again. Seven said she could solve it earlier, and now Janeway's so pissed off with it that she hands it over. Once it's complete, Janeway asks how she figured it out. The answer is simple. She cheated. Scanning the mechanism to find out how it worked was far more efficient than solving the problem it was giving them. It's the prompt Janeway needs, of course. We can't outthink Softly Spoken and company, so we'll just be a bunch of filthy cheating bastards instead. Their strength is in their unified intelligence, and that intelligence communicates through the telepathic gubbins on their ship. You know, the one Seven connected to, and can fuck up if she has access to it again. Now all we have to do is convince them to take Seven, without making it look deliberate. The bounty hunters are calling softly spoken. They know about the deception, but are willing to capture Voyager anyway, for triple the cost. Either that or the bounty hunters will let Voyager go, so softly spoken agrees. Ships converge and pooping happens. Voyager takes a beating and there are some minor kabooms to make it look nice and convincing. It has to be when softly spoken can drop in at will, and he does so now. Janeway doesn't listen to his doom-mongering because that wouldn't be believable. What would be believable is somebody nicking a shuttle, considering how many times that's happened before. Seven's on it, of course, taking matters into her own hands. The shuttle disappears, and so does softly spoken. Seven tells them she won't cooperate if Voyager is destroyed, and softly spoken tries to call off the attack. The bounty hunters have other ideas, saying they won't stop until they're paid. Softly spoken can smell that something's off, as uncloaking to pay them would make his ship a potential target. It could be a trap, but if it is, Seven would know about it. And the way to see if she knows is to relink her to the telepathic network and take a look in her brain. Which is, of course, precisely what we wanted. The doc detects one of her brainial implants activating, and Tuvok shits a jamming signal down it from Voyager. Lightning arcs along Seven's face jewellery, and the telepathic gizmo goes offline. Softly spoken realises what's happening a couple of seconds too late to do anything about it, and ordering Tall Crab to break the link does nothing, as he can no longer understand what softly spoken is saying. Janeway tells the bounty hunters that they're free to start farting fireworks at the place where softly spoken's ship should be, and a bit of shaking suggests their aim is true. An alarm tells softly spoken that things are about to get significantly worse, and the ship reappears to be greeted by no small amount of pooping. Seven is teleported back to Voyager, and softly spoken makes a projected appearance too. His attempts at persuasion fail, and Seven calls him a dickhead too, before his projection fails, and he disappears. That might have something to do with the proper kicking that those bounty hunters are giving them, and we leave them to sort out their differences as we fly away. Okay, let's get the elephant out of the way. At one point during the brainstorming session, Janeway says of the think tank, their ship's hull is neutronium-based alloy, impervious to our weapons. If that's the case, it undermines the end of the story. Any attack from the bounty hunters would be irrelevant. The think tank would just have to repair the translator and bugger off. It might be uncomfortable from the kinetic impact of the weapons, but hardly life-threatening if the hull is made of unexplodium. And why would the bounty hunters even bother attacking when they or we could just teleport the members of the think tank into holding anyway? We know that's an option as we grabbed Seven. I presume it's been deliberately left open in case the creators wanted to bring them back in a future episode, but the result is an unconvincing end to the tale. I take issue with the size of the debris used in the deception against the bounty hunters too. You could argue that they're projections using the holo emitters we installed on the hull for Basics Part 1 at the end of Season 2, but in that episode we also stated such projections wouldn't fool scanners. Indeed, this was confirmed by the bounty hunters themselves when they said they'd have been able to detect a hologram but not an isomorphic projection when their true client was revealed to them by Janeway. The alternative is that the debris was replicated, but as one of the pieces was the width of the entire deflector dish, that's not a realistic option. I'm willing to accept that we can replicate shuttles, which we lost another of in this episode by the way, but copying the front of decks 9 through 15 is a bit much. That being said, the episode is not without its charms. The idea of a celestial consultant agency is an entertaining one, and the interaction between Softly Spoken and Seven is worth greater exploration too. Was the fact that Softly Spoken was taken as a child against his will part of the reason she rejected their offer? It's reminiscent of her own experience with the Borg. They were doing the same thing of a sort, taking what they felt would bring them closer to perfection, with no consideration of the consequences to those affected. If that's the case, how would a group who had access to her memories during the time she was linked not factor this into their approach? She'd already rejected an offer to rejoin the Borg. This would essentially be more of the same, the pursuit of perfection without an underlying moral or ethical framework. Are we then implying that she still feels the draw of that goal and, were a few factors tweaked, would agree to the offer? Or was Softly Spoken mistaken in believing that their comparable experiences would make her more open to his offer? Perhaps he was simply so arrogant as to think that anybody with a similar intellect would jump at the chance to join them, regardless of their dealings with others. The belief that everybody else would do the same as you given the chance is a unifying theme for those with questionable ethics. Under different circumstances, one where we got those long-running plot threads that I'm always banging on about, perhaps the think tank could have been an interesting nemesis for Voyager. We could even have hinted at their existence during multiple standalone stories, implying that they were responsible for a number of the seemingly unconnected difficulties and threats faced by the crew. As it is, we're left with a serviceable episode where the points of interest are sufficient to outweigh the flaws, and a clear enough moral to the story. In many ways, you could argue that ticks all of the boxes for classic Star Trek. End of episode.
So the Doctor's a poltergeist?
Yep.
I guess that's what Denara meant when she said he'd given her the willies. Anything else I should know about?
Let's see. The phasers are portals that shoot out focused energy from hell. The Borg are really golems ruled by a powerful sorcerer. And the warp core is filled with fairies.
Do we do any science at all?
Nope, it's all magic. The closest we have to science is Neelix's cooking, and some people think that's supernatural as well.
Why is that?
Because it's a miracle nobody has died. Woof.